Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by the award-winning NordVPN. I've been using Nord for years now because it secures my internet traffic and keeps my data private, especially when traveling or on public Wi-Fi. NordVPN has servers in over 60 countries, does not log your data, unlocks Netflix and other geographic restrictions on entertainment content, and has a 30-day money-back guarantee. To save 70% on a subscription, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com/NordVPN or use the promo code BTFuture. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Giles Lowe and Arne Lang-Ree. They're both founders at Spanner. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you guys on the show. I think a lot of people know and use a lot of the products that you guys have created over the years, but maybe before we get into that, let's get to know each one of you a little bit better. And Giles, maybe do you want to give us a bit of background on yourself, kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, how you got to Spanner, and then I do want to cover kind of how you guys met, but let's give each one of you a bit of a background first.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey, Kevin. So from the UK, I grew up in Oxfordshire, always been tinkering, always been in design, taking apart parents' radios, much to their dissatisfaction. So always been interested in that stuff. And then through going to school, going into some business elements, going into some biology elements, going into design, chose the path of design. It was obvious to me that that's where I wanted to go. And then university, studied product design in the UK, and had sort of a pivotal moment, a particular lecture from Trevor Bayliss, who invented the clockwork radio. And it's really about purpose of design, and came up with the name of Spanner. And roll on forward 25 years on, after coming to the US, spending some time in North Carolina doing cell phones before they were smart, but still cool products, doing the flip phones. Came to California, spent 10 years in the Apple ecosystem, designing across all platforms, which obviously is great experience and great knowledge right there.
Sure.
And then founded Spanner 6 years ago with Arne, and I'm CEO and founder. And really for us, it's building an amazing team, super senior, to drive products, but drive products with purpose, drive products with impact, and enable people that have the ideas to actually be successful, which is part of winding all the way back to that Trevor Bayliss introduction. We could have a whole nother podcast on. It's what's the point, right? What's the point of what we're doing, what we're creating, having kids and all those pieces? It's the impact level, legacy level, and that's what we're trying to do at Spanner, right? We're forging forward with some pretty amazing products, and feel extremely grateful. When you can help a startup drive a process and avoid the pitfalls that we all know happens in hardware, that we've got a lot of press around, just enabling that partnership of the whole ecosystem of doing product, it's pretty special, right? It's certainly worth getting up and going to work every day, and I think Arne comes every day as well. So I'll let him do his intro.
I do show up most days, yeah. Thanks, Kevin. I was born in Norway, but my family brought us all here when I was just 2 years old. So I grew up right here in the Valley. I'm Norwegian by birth, I guess you could say, but a California kid through and through. Like Giles, I think that's one of the ways we're sort of kindred spirits is anything that stopped working in the house when I was growing up, it was mine, and I would take it apart and just awesome. Explore and try and figure out, everything from the washing machine to the toaster, just to satisfy my curiosity, what was going on the inside. when a lot of kids were thinking, they wanted to be astronauts, the space shuttle program was just kind of getting going, and talk of the space station, I had the same kind of thoughts, except I always imagined myself as being the guy who was designing stuff to be used up there. It's a brand new universe out there, and they're going to need things designed specifically for that. So kind of already in my head, I had that kind of direction. But alas, the space program was not inevitably where I was headed. I got my mechanical engineering degree from Stanford, but I didn't discover their now sort of famous product design school until my senior year there. So I took off and got a few years of experience out in industry, working at a plastic factory down in Los Angeles.
Oh, interesting.
And then I went back to Stanford to do their master's program in product design. It wasn't called the D School back then, but it has since evolved into that institution. Then career-wise, I've done product design now for decades in markets ranging from toys and kids like science and nature products, sporting goods, medical devices, and then consumer electronics over the last 10, 12 years as well.
Very, very cool. So I'm curious, before we dive a bit deeper into Spanner and what you guys are doing now, how did you guys meet? Because I think a lot of people struggle with actually finding a co-founder, and I always find it interesting to learn about how people actually connected and met and decided to start a company together.
Yeah, in a previous entity, Arne and I were sort of leaders in different domains at a company, and essentially leaders of those domains is driving a mini business, right? So
Got you.
We would share notes often on, hey, what's the pain points? Yeah, what's going good, and how could we help? But living in separate worlds, even within an organization, that I think gave us the freedom to have those conversations of sharing notes, yes, and then over the years it just gels. But it's a sort of that deeper thing of we need to do something together. We align so much philosophically on about product design and why and where and process and helping others, all those pieces, right? It just makes sense. A lot of things we've done since, it's because it feels right. It's because it's the gut. It's because it's no question. And we're skeptical as hell engineers, so we come in it with a pretty sort of thick barrier of entry anyway. When things flow, they really flow. So it's for us, no question whether it's going to business together, and that still rings true today, I believe.
Interesting. But what was the decision to actually basically just go for this and actually start your own company? Because that's got to be scary, especially in the space you guys are in when you're actually designing products, right? Like physical products.
Yeah, there was absolutely an aha moment. It just became clear that working for somebody else at a company owned by somebody else, regardless of how much freedom you're granted on paper, as it were, to call the shots, it's not your company, and
Right.
and there is a limit to which shots you're allowed to call, and to really take it as far and as deep as we want it to go. The only way to get there would be to open our own firm.
Yeah, for me, no question, right? I had to do my own company, right? This is something instilled in going to have a milkshake with my dad in local sort of Oxfordshire market town insurance office after school growing up. It's must have own destiny, and through university and having the design impact want to have, just got to take control of it, right? And if there's anything that's an impediment to that vision, you get pushed, right? And I think, to be honest, jumping off the cliff is a reason to jump off the cliff. It's really exciting. It's really visceral. And it's a pretty soft landing around here if it doesn't work out, right? My wife isn't on this podcast, but you've got to give it a go. Yeah? For us, that moment and that journey Super, super fun. Would highly, highly recommend it to anybody.
No, that's awesome. So did you guys land your first client before you guys started Spanner, or how did you guys, kind of get this thing off the ground? Because when you're doing hardware, it's you need potentially like a lot of hardware yourself to create some of this stuff, or walk us through the early version of Spanner and up until kind of what you guys are doing now and how it's grown over the last number of years.
Total leap of faith. How about that?
Okay.
There's the chapter, the business book. So we were so passionate and believed in what we were doing. Classic, we'll build it and it will come, and it did.
Interesting.
First day we had I think 3 to 5 clients. So we started chatting to people, and there were projects coming to us. So super fortunate,
Right.
and definitely scary, but we had made a lot of connections, and we had some good friends around us, and that seems come through.
Very, very cool.
Yes.
So keep going.
Absolutely leveraging. Absolutely leveraging the networks. Not something we could have pulled off when we were 25. You just don't have the networks to be able to do that. Like Giles said, fortunately there were folks that wanted to embark on the journey with us, and off we went.
No, that's actually really good advice, right? Because I think so many people don't realize how important kind of experience and connections in a network can be until you actually have those things in place, once you've been in a career for 5, 10, maybe longer than that. And it sounds like, you guys built this. Obviously, people knew your work. They trusted you because when you went on your own, they sent you work.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's, I think lurking in there is the distinction between freelancing and actually consulting.
Okay. Interesting. And how do you define that?
Freelancing, if you think about it, is a more of a tactical relationship.
Okay.
You're selling your time to help execute. As consultants, we bring a far more comprehensive narrative to the whole program. We're in a much more strategic relationship with our clients, both as advisors and also in how we engage with them as a business model.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because you're right. It's a lot of positioning yourself and your services and what yourself or your company is bringing to the table, right? Where you can be very quickly pigeonholed into one vertical or the other when you're trying to be in the other, right? No, that's actually really good advice. So I'm curious though, let's dive a lot deeper into what you guys do at Spanner and how has it kind of stayed the same and changed over the years? Because I think technology nowadays has come a long way in the time that you guys have been around and in your career. So walk us through that journey.
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's the experience. So
Okay.
Product design, by definition, is a holistic process, right? There's the whole ecosystem which is required to get a product from idea into shipping, right? And we can make light of that as much as we like. But
Sure.
Design the experience first. So for us, we wanted to design Spanner. So we wanted to design the studio. We have a studio which most people think is an industrial design studio rather than a cookie cutter engineering space.
Interesting.
We want to design the experience from the studio that we have to the people that we hire to what it's like to walk in the door, and it's all curated with thought and design and purpose. So our whole narrative is way beyond just how do we engineer this particular gadget to be Bluetooth connected, for example, and that carries through the whole process and the whole philosophy and the background of what we do. So for us, that's super important. Super important that we never lose that core of why we exist. So that extrapolate that through to a client walking in the door and they're giving us their pitch. we never know what they're going to be pitching, which is super exciting.
Sure.
You have to come to some and it could be some of the big five right in the valley, or it could be Joe that's got an idea and doesn't really have any experience how to do it. And we love all those conversations. We love how they go, and we're just looking for how we can help in that process. So center it all the way back down into how to do product design. Depends where they are in their phases, but we can map those out a la carte to any product, any technology, any size of company. But most importantly, it's to the business model. So that whole ecosystem that's needed for the success of that point of time, that baby that they're talking about, that they have the passion around, and it's creating that conversation, that narrative, and that experience for that product. So again, that's way deeper, at least for us, on what it means of, hey, can we do an engineering project for you, and can we make your widget get to get to market, right? There's passion and love and life and that needs to go into it, right? And yes, we have milestones. Yes, we've got phase gates, and yes, we've got over 400 years of experience, but it's way deeper than that once you know how to do products. Lots of the sides on how you get success.
Sure. So,
yeah, Kevin, you mentioned the evolution of technology and how it applies to what we do, and of course the virtual tools for design and analysis have come a long way. There's 3D printing always comes up, even though that's been around for quite a while. But these things, they're tools, and certainly they de-risk certain aspects of the program, they accelerate certain aspects of the program, and all that's great. It's almost a full-time job staying up with advances in all of the tools that we use. But what hasn't changed, at the core of a design process, it's a narrative. It's storytelling. It's getting to know our clients' stories about where they want to take their company, what their dreams are, not just what specs they expect to see in their product. And that's all about conversations and relationships, and building the trust and the partnership with all of our clients to really get at that core part of what we do.
Interesting. So I want to dive a bit deeper into the process. I'm sure it's probably a bit different depending on who's coming to you, whether it's like a huge company or it's one person with just an idea, and maybe it's nothing more than a napkin and kind of everywhere in between. But do you guys have kind of like a rough guide of how you guys kind of approach it, or walk us through a bit of your process and the journey of kind of going from nothing to something?
Yeah, thank you. We tend to start with the end, if you will.
Okay.
We'll want to know what it is that this product will do in the hands of a user. How is it going to change somebody's life? Where does it fit into their day or whatever it is? So really, we need to get at the user experience that we're trying to create. They have the napkin sketches. There may be some prototypes. They've created some kind of proof of concept, perhaps. But we want to respectfully sort of peel that back and start fresh with the user experience that we're trying to create, just to make sure that in everything leading up to that conversation, they haven't missed something. Maybe we can reset certain aspects and make it better. And then we want to talk about where they want to take this. Do they want to license this idea to somebody? Do they want to actually create a company and a brand and get into manufacturing? And be the next Nest or Fitbit or whatever.
Does that actually change the process if I want to license a product as compared to create a company around it, or not really?
Yeah, It does in the sense that it changes what are the appropriate steps. You know, how are you going to spend your time and money to reach the appropriate objective for that longer term goal?
Okay.
And that's the key, the objective. So what is the objective that we're building for, we're engineering for, and right-sizing the model for that? So we all know the pains of developing hardware. So adapting the process for, is somebody just going for fundraising? So we commonly have that conversation. So there's a great idea. What is the MVP, proof of concept model that needs to be built, where we can introduce this to amazing industrial designers that we're so fortunate to work with, where they can create a beautiful model of what the form looks like. Banner creates a mechanical model to demonstrate the technology. That's what a venture capitalist needs to join the dots. They don't need anything more. They don't need that fully integrated. And you want to get there to an MVP schedule budget, blood, sweat, and tears as quick as possible, to enable that conversation of funding to then really enable their future success. There's no point us developing it all the way through, or underdeveloping it where the hook and the value isn't there. And so again, peeling back that objective, and something we regularly do for clients, whether it's startups or whether, again, it's the super big companies that have got a skunkworks project, is provide a workshop, provide a strategic workshop where, yes, I'm sure all the questions have already been answered, but let's do an immersion process. Let's bring in domain experts for all the appropriate areas of your product sector, and let's have a conversation. Right? That could be an afternoon. It can be a day. It can be a week. It could be 4 weeks. But it absolutely changes the conversation every single time. It's super fun, if nothing else. We crack open the beers at the end, but it changes the platform of A, how we're going to work together, and B, certainly how the product is going to be developed, what the next steps are. The output from that is a strategic plan where everybody's aligned by collaboration of getting to that point of how we're going to do it together. And usually there's some pretty interesting pops of de-featuring is as important as featuring on getting to market. Arne always has a corner of the board that is V2, where we push that technology or that feature to the next round once you've at least got your product into market. But again, designing the narrative, looking at objectives, boilerplate process. Someone comes in, they have an idea, there's probably some feasibility that needs to occur. And that can go in many different ways, whether it's mechanical feasibility, whether it's software, firmware, hardware. Who are the right people? Who are the best in the world to do that feasibility? It's super, super, super cheap and easier to do it early, way more than it is to do it later. Yeah, the curve of return of changing a design feature when you've made tooling is hundreds of thousands, and to change it early is maybe a sketch on a whiteboard, and that curve carries through the whole process. So we're trying to go back to the objective continuously to see if we're all still on the right path. So feasibility first, architecture sets up all the components of that product. Essentially, it's setting the strategy, getting 80% solid through architecture, having a super solid design. Detailed design is the execution of that architecture. And that simply, again, we can have a really long conversation on this, but it's basically prototype and break it, prototype and break it, prototype and break it, and get it into people's hands to see what the experience is like. And then production and build is, whether you're building 10, whether you're building a million, it's still a matter of refining that build process so you can get to that objective finish line.
Sure. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks, an all-in-one small business invoicing and accounting solution. I've been using FreshBooks for over a decade to send estimates for time and expense tracking, sending invoices, and collecting payments online. Then at tax time, I just generate a report that can be sent off to an accountant. To get a free trial of FreshBooks, please go to buildingthefutureshow.com/FreshBooks. So do you guys potentially help somebody make that decision? Because I think a lot of people might come to you with an idea, and whether they're technical or not is probably irrelevant. But if if they're saying, yeah, I want to build the next like Nest type company, for example, and get acquired by, you know, Google, for example, you're like, okay, well, sure, like that's potentially possible for this. But, you know, as you're having conversations with them, you're like, look, it might be easier for you to license it to Nest instead of trying to build a new Nest. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you help people through that process too, especially if they've never been through actually creating a physical product in the world?
For sure. It's often the case, you know, especially with the smaller startups.
Sure.
They're so deep into their idea and how they're going to change the world that you know they haven't yet thought about, or they don't know that there are these other paths available that might be more appropriate for, you know, for their future and for their family. That absolutely happens all the time.
Interesting. So I'm curious to know, obviously you guys probably can pick the types of products and companies you want to work with, at least at this point, but what makes you guys decide on the types of products that you guys work on? Because you guys have built some really cool tech stuff. You guys are doing some real stuff in the kind of environmental impact space. So walk us through the types of products that you guys like to work on and have been working on.
Yeah. So first of all, what's the impact profile of the product? So that's a big part of our future vision. So how is it impacting us through the environment? How it's impacting us socially, and by design, a really wide funnel of what impact can mean.
Okay.
That for us is super close to our hearts and is about purpose and sort of why we exist at Spanner. But it's also as important of who the executive team is, really the crux of the idea and the story behind it. What's the passion profile of the people that we're working with? Because again, it comes all the way back to the experience.
Okay.
The road can be super hard together, and if we're not aligning in those first couple of jam sessions, it's likely going to be a pretty hard journey together.
Okay.
There's got to be fun, yeah, and we've got to believe in it. We have to believe in it as much as the founders do. We need to be pseudo-founders of each product that we're working on, and that to be not questioned for us internally. So we listen to what all the employees want to be working on, what are the emerging trends, what are the products that are close to people's hearts. And again, it comes down to one of those gut check things as a business of Arne and I looking at each other and going, this is the one. And we're fortunate we can have some degree of selection. Touch wood. So designing the studio, designing the portfolio, designing the clients that are coming in is really, really important. Important for all the staff.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's one of the great benefits of running our own place. You know, and also one of the scariest parts, but we only have ourselves to answer to. You know, we can look somebody in the eye and understand immediately that that passion profile is there, and we really want to work with this person. We really want to support them. We want to help them do what they set out to do. You know, maybe someday it'll come back and bite us that, you know, we make decisions based on what's the right thing to do, and we go with our gut, and it's quick and it's efficient and it feels great. But you know, so far so good. It seems to be working.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very cool. Well, and it also seems like you guys have the ability to at least build the first few versions of a prototype right at your office. Is that correct, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, we encourage all of us to not be in CAD. Yeah, that's the tool. And he talks about technology, and
Yeah.
CAD is a great thing. We all grew up on drawing boards with razor blades and pencils and vellum. CAD is an amazing tool for all of us. It changed the design process. It's enabled so much. Let's not forget about chopping up bits of wood, yeah,
Sure.
and screwing things together and getting back to the fundamentals. Make sure that's fully integrated into the process, and we want to have our team be as much in the shop as we are on the CAD. Yeah, it's design the strategy. We're fortunate enough to have a a pretty robust shop at our studio. We have our own CNC. We have a master machinist of 35 years experience.
Wow.
Who is just amazing and is there in the brainstorms. He's already making stuff in his head before we've actually finished what we're saying. So that making of stuff, that's when you really learn. Yeah, the rest is, okay, you bring experience to the table and you can avoid some pitfalls that way, but you've got to make it and observe and you learn. And you can't do too many prototypes. You then need to tailor it to schedules, budgets, and all other pieces. But it's many times we are literally getting bits of 2x4 and getting a particular type of friction hinge. Think of everyone's laptop right now.
Right.
That's where that starts. What's that experience and that friction, that weightlessness? That's not the $1 million of tooling for that torsion spring. It's because there was a couple of bits of 2x4 screwed together at one point, and you learn and you inform, and then you work on making that prototype a little bit more high fidelity until you get to that notion of, right, we've got the direction. And that's beautiful. It's lovely because you don't assume, right? No matter your experience, you don't assume, and you're open to the experience to be sort of presented to yourself.
Yeah, you have to expect to learn something when you make a prototype. That's the whole point of making it in the first place. And often it's what you learn completely blows away everything that you'd assumed over the previous few weeks. But if you don't do that, it's a much more expensive assumption farther down the road.
But our machines don't stop, right? The 3D printer never stops. The drill press is going along the side, and the CNC is always going. I'm glad they've got continuous power, unlike us humans.
Sure. Well, no, and I think the other thing too is like nothing beats actually holding a version of the product or the actual product in your hand, right? To judge just feel and scale and even just you take like some of the most like famous like iPhone or Android phone, you look at the photo of those phones and sometimes you're like, oh, that looks awful, or that's the nicest thing I've ever seen. And then you go into the store and you might be like, wow, I hated the photo of this, but like it looks amazing when I hold it in my hand and it feels amazing. Or the opposite, right? So like unless you actually hold something in your hand, it's so hard. And I think even probably for your clients and yourselves even sometimes, like even when it's in CAD and you can rotate it around and zoom in and out, until you actually can physically hold a version of it, you really don't know how you truly feel about it, good, bad, or other. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely fair. And CAD can trick you. That's where the experience comes in. You flip on the high resolution rendering tools and it looks absolutely beautiful on screen. So it's done, right? What's the problem? But you're right. I mean, aesthetic is a whole body experience. It has to do with every aspect of the device. We experience things with all of our senses, not just our eyeballs staring at the screen. And so you have to hold it. You have to climb onto it. You have to interact with the prototype in the way that you would in the real world, and the designer's experience and training and education comes in when they can then sort of project what they're experiencing, forward into the user's world, and start to understand where the design needs to go next.
And the user sensitivity, it's look at that curve over the last 10, 15 years. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So
the bar is up.
We all used to remember perhaps using the old school calculators and going, wow, this is the best thing ever. And like, hey, mine's got can work with sun power. We were amazed on that. So it's got soft buttons. But us now, we know the big players have changed the profile of user experience, and we all expect it. We expect it, but we also expect not to necessarily pay a premium for it. It just has to happen. And the finesse and having to spend all that time on the fruit company products, it's beautiful, right? We're in a space where the whole world expects that, and to try and execute to that level on a different type of budget infrastructure and startup mode is fantastic, right? So you need to be touching those and feeling them, because if you put something out there that's concrete, even if it looks beautiful, if that hinge or that mechanism or that lighting effect isn't perfect, you haven't got a product, which is which is daunting for a lot
Yeah,
of people. But for us,
interesting.
that's our playground, and we feel so fortunate. We're at a time when that is the expectation, and being able to have some tips and tricks to be able to help that journey for people.
Sure. So how much of the software side are you guys writing, or are you working with a dev team, or how does that work? Because I think the hardware software integration is so important for basically the product to be successful, because there's a lot of times if one doesn't work or properly, it's just kind of a garbage product.
Yeah, and that's not the only domain of expertise that comes into play. A lot of domain experts that we work with are in solving problems that the user never sees because we've solved the problem. But
Interesting.
here at Spanner, we focus on the physical artifact. We're mechanical designers, mechanical engineers, and then we have a network of fantastic partners, resources, domain experts that we can bring in for various programs on sort of an ad hoc, as needed basis. So the team can be sometimes quite fluid, and that would include, the whole software stack, the app on the phone. I mean, we want to sit down with the app developers to understand how they see the user interface and how the user moves through working with the product, because that informs how the actual artifact needs to work.
And that needs to be a seamless collaboration.
Sure.
If you've got one part of that ecosystem which is falling short, then I think we all know some examples of this.
No, that makes sense. And that's actually a really smart way of doing it, because you guys work with so many different platforms, and probably software that's been around for long periods of time and software that's brand new. Sometimes it might be software needs to be written for the entire device, and other times it's just like an app that connects to a device through Bluetooth or something like that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's decisions folded in there that hopefully you never see in the end. In terms of component selection, say, for instance, to what extent does the UI need high-end graphics? Are you going to be running 4K streaming video on there? Because that has implications for the graphics processor, which has thermal implications that we need to deal with on the mechanical side to make sure that the product doesn't overheat.
Right.
Everything's completely intertwined.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So how about you guys give us some examples of some products you guys have worked on, or types of products you guys have worked on, because you've done a ton of stuff. I think a lot of people would know a lot of the stuff and or use it almost daily.
Yeah, sure. So I think a recent example in the news is the Brava Smart Oven.
Interesting.
It's been a super fun journey with Brava. The founder, Thomas, came to us. We'd worked with him previously on a different device, the August Lock, which we can talk about maybe.
Okay.
But again, what's the experience? We have Thomas, who's a good friend, turn up at the studio going, right, here's the next pitch. It's Thomas. It's going to be interesting. He pulls out an old school toaster oven covered in copper tape and whips up his laptop and says, "Can I cook you a steak?" And we're kind of in at that point, yeah.
Fair enough.
Within 3 minutes, he cooks us a steak and then goes into I've reverse engineered some NASA technology and So super fun, and we were involved way before I think they were even incorporated at that point. So the impact of that journey. We're involved all the way through the production, through their journey of when they're getting new space, when they're in a house, which is just classic Silicon Valley episode right there, into it's a 200 person company in Redwood City, and they're shipping, and it's an amazing product. So watching that journey, being part of it, and being so again intertwined into the process and experience, we feel super fortunate about, and some pretty interesting introductions, helping them grow and helping them hire. It's fantastic, right? So it's changed my life personally, right? I've got my triplets cooking me dinners now. We're done. I think we're peaked. Yeah, a super fun journey.
Very cool. Do you guys want to give a couple other examples?
I mean, certainly there's some recognizable brands that jump out. If you just scroll through the website, we've done a bunch of work with Fitbit, GoPro, NVIDIA, the August lock that Giles mentioned. But those are all amazing successes. But it doesn't mean that necessarily that those are our favorites per se.
Okay.
There's been really a lot of fun, challenging stuff. Very successful smaller companies that maybe just don't have quite that notoriety yet. Like Deep Sentinel is a home security suite of product.
Actually, I had him on the show, actually.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Very cool.
Yeah, so then how much fun it was to work with them, and help contribute to bring that vision to life. There's Expansive is a wireless charging platform for consumer electronics that has some really interesting technological advances, which in turn makes things a little more challenging for us.
Sure.
And we get to work with some amazing industrial design studios in the Bay Area to make their vision come to life and meld that with the technological requirements. And Expansive is an awesome example of that. It's basically it's wireless charging, but it's not positionally sensitive. So with your typical disc, say, you need to align your phone pretty well on that disc to maximize the charging, and the Expansive has eliminated that problem.
And a couple of impact examples. So Sana is a device that uses light and sound to essentially change the pattern of your brain to get you into a relaxed state. So interesting story of it started as a sleep device, but it's pivoted more into chronic pain and to help with conditions such as PTSD and many different things. Super beautiful to enable that journey and the impact that can actually make. And the founder having his own story of an injury in the desert and then being in a wheelchair and having chronic pain and come up with the idea of the technology and trying to push that forward, which is great to be involved with.
Yep. And another similar one is that folks might not be familiar with. It's not a consumer electronics product. It's actually in the agricultural space. It's the arable sensor pod. That's a relatively small device that can be deployed out amongst the crops and can monitor how the crops are doing at a very high resolution remotely. And then Arable combines that with sort of the macro data of weather patterns and whatnot to give farmers like a really comprehensive assessment of their business.
The important thing for us is not to go in a single direction of product. It's really important that we're working in different sectors. We're working in consumer electronics by nature of being in Silicon Valley, but it's also touch technology and furniture. Let's also touch agriculture. Let's touch healthcare, autonomous vehicles and mobility, the household in all its different forms. There's so many areas that are still going through transformation of how technology is influencing the experience for us. Look at cars, see what happens over the next 3 years. It's going to get really interesting once those technologies start integrating into the ecosystem. So at the minute, we have more single point development of technologies such as doorbell and lock, and then oven, and in agriculture, what's growing, and the car, and healthcare, and how many steps we're taking, those will start integrating, and our life profile will become interesting. We can talk about the data and how that gets tracked and who that's for, but let's stay on the positive side, at least for now, how that can influence our lives through our health and through our decisions and through our families and all those pieces. Really interesting where that's going to go for the next 5 to 10 years, and how our daily lives are going to change with technology. And we always hope, at least here, that it's going to be more in the background, but let's perhaps be honest that it's going to be more in the foreground, but hopefully will enable us to be further away from technology, if that makes sense.
No, totally. Well, I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is the easier something is to use, or you forget about something because it just works for you all the time, was a lot harder for the teams that actually built the hardware and software. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair to say. And that's like the standard, the sort of the bar that Giles was talking about earlier, that consumers have become more sophisticated over the last couple of decades in terms of what they expect in that regard. Of course I should be able to drop my smartphone, in a fountain while I'm touring Italy. Of course it should be waterproof. Why shouldn't it? But that kind of thing presents a lot of challenges during development, but that's, invested properly, that effort then just makes for such a great user experience and success for that business.
But also talking frankly around what that means. So when we do have people coming through Spanner to pitch that idea, being able to have a pretty secure narrative around that beautiful that you want to drop it in the fountain doing a selfie, what that takes, which is fine. Let's support it, and let's get the teams in place, and let's go for it. Let's
maybe
do
it's
the
in a future
moonshot
version.
Yeah, but do you have the runway? What's your funding profile? What's the team makeup? What's your executive hiring plan? All the other facets of that ecosystem that's needed to get you there. Let's make sure we be really, really visceral, which is sort of part of our meeting number one conversation of permission to be visceral. It's really important, right? When we're doing development, because let's not fake ourselves in what's needed to get to that finish line. Let's be open and frank and really challenge, because what comes out the other end is then going to be way more realistic, and it's a fun conversation. Yeah,
I mean, we're engineers and tech geeks like anybody else, and we can rabbit hole on the next shiny new object, but it's our ethic though that we need to talk about what's appropriate, and again that comes back to the objective and what is that user experience that we're trying to create. Does it really need that shiny new object piece of technology to make for a great experience?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's actually really quite fascinating, right? I think so many people want the first version to have everything, and it's like, well, maybe that's possible, or maybe that we need to roll out some of those in a future version, right? And I think just having that open conversation early on before anything's actually designed or developed can save everyone a lot of time, money, and frustration.
Yeah, and it's the next generation product, and maybe the next generation splits into 2 or 3 different price points, and maybe there are accessories, and and that gets back to the question about, for our clients, is where are you going with this? Where do you want to take your new company? You're not going to sell this first product forever.
Right.
We need to start thinking about what's next, so that this first stepping stone is the right stepping stone to take you to the future.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys, and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, so certainly our website, spannerpd.com, is our main sort of forum. I'm sure we're on Facebook and Instagram, but I think that's the main piece. So yeah, check us out on there. You'll see the products we're working on, and happy to chat to folks and enable great products.
And we promise if you click on the email us link in there that goes to what might look like a generic email address, that lands in our inboxes personally, and so
via China.
Yeah, so you'll have our attention.
No, very cool, guys. Well, I really appreciate you both taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Kevin. You too.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's been really fun. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.